Hi, welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Joshua.
Fuck, I need another thing. And I of the tiger.
Great. This is our Comic Talk Talks Comics episode for the month. We're going to talk about creators versus characters.
So, okay, let's just get the shit out of the way first. So, I know that there's a few characters that both of us kind of like fanboy over, which I think as we get further into this discussion, that's mainly what we're going to be talking shit on. So, I think we should just get it out of the way first. Who's like that for you?
Probably Luke Cage,
Luke
I
Cage.
think, is an obvious one. Maybe Iron Fist too. Invincible. But that's a whole nother thing that we'll be talking about because that's sort of the line there. And then maybe even I have kind of a Cubs fan obsession with Superman sort of thing, the lovable loser kind of deal where I love the idea of Superman, but I rarely like Superman, which I think is great stuff to mine here. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's kind of probably the first time that somebody's described Superman as the lovable loser. I mean,
Well,
maybe Clark Kent.
in the context of this,
I know, but it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
But question, obviously.
Oh
is a
yeah,
big one
me
for
too. Yeah, definitely.
Catwoman, I really like the idea of. Again, I think the idea of Harley Quinn is really cool, but there's like one or two issues in existence that I'm aware of that I'm actually a fan of, which is really unfortunate because that just kind of ruins like everything. Like I can't go buy Harley shit because that's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, Batman a little bit.
Oh, Dick Grayson for me.
Yeah.
I'm a big Dick Grayson fan. I always have been. Yeah. Even before I was really into comics, Dick Grayson was one of those things for me where I think just what he represented, like he's kind of the avatar, or at least that's what he used to be used for, was the avatar into the DC Comics world, the young boy.
Sure.
So when you're a kid, at least Dick Grayson, Robin is kind of like that.
You can identify with.
You could, yeah, he was the entry point.
Oh, Flash is probably the other big one for me. Which
Barry Allen Flash, Wally West Flash, or just the Flash.
I mean, they both have their high points. I'm not one of those people that's like, this is the only one that matters to me, But in that one, I think even there's a certain method of fanboyism to the Flash that's different from other characters because like he's got like the one fucking power, like that's it, and they have to make him seem different from everybody else that has super speed plus like four other things, so how they do that is just very scientific things, like what happens when like as he approaches this speed, like he actually starts to generate lift, and how he has to compensate with that, and if he vibrates at like the same frequency as this material, then he can pass right through it and stuff like that. So it is like I would say a step more intelligent than like did you see when Superman fought this guy?
Right.
But it's still kind of childish shit, even though it's sort of in the guise of intellectualism.
Sure. So getting that out of the way, I think the meat of what we want to talk about here is just comparing and contrasting and maybe talking about the differences in philosophy, I think, of paying attention to and following creators versus paying attention to and following specific characters. So, although there's some exceptions, some people like Jack Kirby and Jim Lee. Jim Lee? Is that his fucking name? Like old dude.
Yeah.
It really is Jim Lee, right?
Yeah, unless you're talking about Stanley. No. That's the other Lee.
Stanley Kubrick? No. So there are some people who kind of made a name for themselves, but I think most of the name that they made was in hindsight. But what I'm getting is over the years, we've moved more and more from where the creator really had very little influence or very little to do with the industry in regards to who followed what, right? Like who was reading what. I think we've moved into more of a creator age now where most informed comic fans are, well, maybe not most, but at least the new breed that we belong to and would follow us or be interested in what we have to say, tend to follow the creators, right? And that's kind of the main thing that we want to talk about here today. So first of all, maybe we should talk about where we think the history of this comes from, or at least I think that might be interesting. I think it starts out with guys like Robert Crumb, or R. Crumb, right? And some of the people doing some of the early like late 70s, early 80s stuff, like Denny O'Neil and Alan Moore, right? And there were these people that were kind of pushing out and doing things that were so different that people were stopping to say, wait, what is this, right? And who wrote this thing?
It's kind of interesting because that was basically the British invasion of comics. You know? I mean, that's like, I think all those guys we just named are British.
Well, Crumb's like from Philadelphia or something, or Chicago, right? One of those dirty cities.
Yeah, but Alan Moore is British. Grant Morrison is British. I think both of them are Scottish. Maybe Alan Moore is English. I'm not sure, but they're from the Isles.
Sure.
Yeah. So, do you think there's maybe some bleed over from British culture or literature into the comics? Like, do you see that background maybe lending itself more towards that sort of storytelling?
Yeah, most certainly. It's definitely. I think you've mentioned before, if you just look at a lot of British media, it tends to be a little more slice of life, a little bit less bang, pow in your face kind of stuff, which obviously is going to bleed into the work that these people do.
Not to mention that it's a cold, rainy, dreary fucking place. Like, you can't see the sun most days, and if you can, people are bitching about it because they have fucking air conditioners, you know?
Yeah.
So just that darkness and lamenting and self-loathing, I mean, it's the perfect breeding ground for that kind of thing. And I hate to say that because, you know, it makes it sound like a shitty place, and it's an awesome place.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it makes sense.
Sure. So I think really it started as kind of an indie thing where there were guys putting out their own books that weren't superheroes, and they were getting their name on things, and people were realizing that maybe comics can be a little bit more intelligent. Harvey Pekar is another example, right? These guys doing early work, mostly black and white, scribbly kind of work.
Sure.
And as we move forward, people started, DC especially, it seems like going out and looking for people like this and giving them a chance to write lesser known DC books. Going back to that old, like, Strange Adventures kind of lineage, right? That we had that fell apart after the Comics Code thing,
right?
And was starting to loosen back up in the late '80s. And they said, well, let's bring people that maybe would have done stuff like that back then in and let them, you know, play with some stuff.
And I think people forget a lot that Vertigo, they didn't just start Vertigo because they were like, hey, let's see what happens, you know, if we put all these, you know, mature readers titles. Like, Vertigo was a response to a shitload of people buying those headier, meatier comics.
Right. So we've had kind of a growth of that now to where maybe not the biggest stuff that's happening, but even the big stuff, the stuff that we generally don't even like Jeff Johns and Jim Lee work and newer Bendis work that it's kind of whatever. Even that stuff, a lot of people are buying that stuff because it's these people, right? They really have moved to the forefront. And I think a lot of people who maybe wouldn't naturally, you know, go out and search a show like ours or comic reviews, I think this is one of the things that, like, the average non-reader understands the least about comic books. Would you agree?
Sure.
I think I know that anytime I tell someone for the first time that I'm big into comics and I read comic books, they immediately start asking me this list of questions. And I think one of the questions that gets asked a lot, almost every time that's relevant to this is, oh, who's your favorite comic book character? Who's your favorite superhero, right? They want to know, they think that we think in those terms, right? Do you get asked that when you... Yeah, right. And what's your general response? How do you handle that?
I mean, it's kind of like, I don't fucking know. I mean, it's like, it's whatever. Yeah. Have you read this? I guess is my response.
Yeah, you try to turn it around maybe, and I try to not be like the preachy educator guy, right? Because they don't care, right? Nobody wants to be that guy. But at the same time, you don't... I personally, when I tell someone I read comics and that's their response, I immediately realize that now they have like an incorrect idea of me and who I am and what I'm into.
It really bothers me when I feel like people have that. Yeah.
Right. So I want to correct it. And usually my response is to just say, well, I don't really have one. I have favorite like runs is what I'll say. I could tell you like what a favorite series of a comic would be that I really like but I don't have a favorite character. It doesn't work that way for me, or I might ask them a response question. Well, who's your favorite movie character? Right. And then they're like, oh, I don't know. And you're like, well, yeah, see, it's kind of the same thing. And that gets them thinking usually. And then it usually leads to a more interesting conversation. But and I think that eventually, I think we're going to maybe have another conversation in time about like perceptions of comic book readers. So let's not get too deep into that.
Sure.
We'll leave that to mine it for later. But
there is there is a market for that shit though. And we can't really forget that. I mean, my job at a high school or part-time at a high school, and there's this kid who's like starting to get into comics and stuff. And like when... he's like talking to me about comics. He's like, trying to talk about like all the different color of Green Lanterns that there are, or, the Red Hulk and stuff. And, for him, like that Jeff Johns shit, that's probably exactly what he wants.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a great example. My 14-year-old stepdaughter, she loves Jeff Johns' Teen Titans. She loves it. She thinks it's great. It's perfect for her. But it's that whole thing. She comes to me with characters that she wants to read, right? She doesn't say, "Hey, will you get me more Jeff Johns?" She just says, "Will you get me more Teen Titans?" Right? Mm-hmm. So to her,
they could change the writer, and she probably
doesn't matter. A, she's not that critical of it, and B, she doesn't even really understand the idea behind like a creator on it yet.
There's a force behind these characters. It doesn't just like, well, there's these characters and that's that.
That's what they are and what they do and how they are. Right. But do you think that then that has a big impact? Because let's not pretend like it's just 14-year-olds that have that viewpoint.
No.
Right. You go into any comic shop where there's guys sitting around and chatting, and there's inevitably going to be a group of them that are talking in these same terms, right? Mm-hmm. So do you think that this whole schism or divide between people like ourselves who are mainly concerned with creators and people who are concerned with characters, do you think this is where we get a lot of these seemingly unsolvable like arguments about things like female Thor, Black Spider-Man?
Yeah. And it's weird because no other literary genre really has this, where there's one set of people that are just like all about certain characters that other people have written over time. And, so it is very uniquely to comic books. But yeah, it's just one of those like two-sided things. And then you have the people who just like to read stuff for artwork too, so
right. And they have a completely different set of characteristics they're looking for.
Right. Yeah, they can give a shit less about the words on the page. Like, they don't care who's writing it. They care who's,
right. As long as the words aren't so bad that they get in the way, like as long as it tells an okay story and then it looks great, they're sold, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right. It's this weird dichotomy where you get
it's a trichotomy.
Well, sure, yeah, that's true. But the oddness of it is that you have the same people writing the same character. You have different people writing the same character, right? So over time, you have these different versions that some people like ourselves thrive on. Like I love, like Batgirl of Burnside is a great example. Like this whole Batgirl that we've been reading, we just did a review, Wednesday that included that.
Sure.
And we love it, right? But it gets a lot of flack for, let me put my cup down, ruining Barbara Gordon, right? She's no longer in the wheelchair. They've pulled her back from being Oracle, and she's just running around as Batgirl again. And a lot of people that are heavily invested in the character Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, in the continuity that's led to up to now, are very angry at it. And they think it's a terrible book now, solely because it's not like it was before. Like they just really, Fletcher and Stewart, they just said, screw all that. Like, we're going to do this
whole series about a girl in a wheelchair.
I'm going to do this other thing that has nothing really to do with that other than the name and the basic idea of the character from back in the day. We'll just kind of start over and have fun. I love it because I don't care.
Yeah.
If it stops being what I like, I'll just stop reading it. Like if Stewart and Fletcher leave, I have no reason to read Batgirl anymore, right? I'll just find like whatever they do next. But these people who read Batgirl continuously because they love Batgirl, right? They're invested in that. And again, if it changes again, they'll probably be angry again.
Yeah, probably. And it doesn't really make sense to me because it seems like such a frustrating... I mean, characters have to go through shit that you don't like all the time. And then these people are like generally still reading those things just because they want to have them. And I mean, what a shitty hobby to have,
It's weird. It reminds me in a way of fans of teams that hate the team.
Yeah.
This phenomenon where it's like, goddamn Cowboys can never, my team never wins.
Yeah.
They're so fucking terrible.
Coach is stupid. He did this and this and this. And if it was me, I would have done this and this and this. And they need to fucking understand that this person is not a starter. And like,
they're so bad this year.
Well, it's even more than that though. It's like they're lording over like the team and saying like they're not doing anything that I think they should do, and that's why they're fucking terrible.
Right. Well, the funny thing is, I used to watch a lot of basketball. Right.
Sure.
But every few years, the team that I rooted for was different, right? And I would get called like all of my friends, everybody I knew would always say I was like a bandwagon fan or like there's other like derogatory terms they use. And I feel like it's this, like there's the same thing that happens in comics for some people, whereas I have this same approach to comics where I don't have any real allegiance to a character in the same way that I don't have allegiance to like a jersey.
Yeah.
Right? Like if the Cowboy or, let's use basketball, like if the Pistons, I loved the Pistons and then most of their players left and their coach left. That's not the Pistons anymore, right? It's like a different team that's now playing. So I don't care like if they're any good anymore because those are different people.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way with comics. Like if Fletcher and Stewart and Tar all leave, then it's a different thing. It still says Batgirl, right? But isn't it a different thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to put that in like literary perspective, I mean, if Dean Koontz came out with like a Dracula novel, like would you feel compelled to read it because you liked the old one? I mean,
right.
No.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great example. Or one that's even vaguely or pretty closely related, right? If you love Christopher Nolan movies, the Batman Christopher Nolan,
sure.
Does that compel you then to watch and be angry about like the Joel Schumacher, like Batman Forever with the nipples? I love those movies, but my point is, like, you don't have to like both, and they're totally different, and different people are going to like different ones. Does one invalidate the other? I don't think they do.
And you don't have to own both on fucking Blu-ray.
Right.
Beyond that,
just don't get that one.
Yeah.
Like, don't read or don't watch Batman and Robin Forever if you're not into that.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
If Batman and Robin came out like every month and people hated it, but they still bought a new copy on DVD like every month.
Yeah.
I'm just like, fuck!
Fuck, this is so terrible!
I still hate this movie.
But I really love Christopher Nolan
I
Batman.
buy it every month and it's terrible.
It's so weird, man. But that's the way a lot of people approach comics, and that's the way in the past comics were done.
Yeah.
But I think in the past, there was this real focus on trying to continue the legacy of writing the character in the same way, and we've lost that. But I don't think I think it allows more creative freedom, and so I don't really care.
Yeah. I think, if anything, it's a good thing. Even if people are super true to the characters, which is, the case in, most of like the big name heroes that have come out in the past like 10, 20 years, like the interesting things about them are always what the individual writer brings to them. Like even if they're playing it super safe, and, not making Batman do any kind of weird shit or anything, it's still their personal effect on it that makes it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So increasing the amount of freedom that they have, how could that be a bad thing? You're just taking the good thing, in my opinion, again, so, the fuck is that? But you're taking the good part about it and you're giving it an even greater level of importance.
Right.
Freedom and stuff.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
How would it be bad?
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I think the last interesting thing we could talk about here that's an interesting amalgamation of these are creator-owned characters, right? And what kind of legacy that's going to have in the future, because
That'll be interesting.
We have characters that are slowly becoming bigger players in the larger culture of comics, right? We have things like I think the Kick-Ass universe, the Millar World Kick-Ass characters are a good example, right? Mm-hmm. We have Invincible, Robert Kirkman's Invincible, that's at like 150 issues now, right? Savage Dragon, Eric Larson's Savage Dragon. So we have these characters who are owned by a specific person. The specific person writes them. And so if you follow the character, you follow the writer. And if you follow the writer, you're following the character. Do you think this is like a proto version where in the future, a lot of these... Do you see any of these creator-owned works slowly being handed out to others to write? And do you think that would be cool or what?
Maybe. I think it would always be interesting. I'm always interested to see a fresh take on anything. I'm kind of interested to see, like, if these characters over time start overtaking some of the classics.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. In 50 years... is Bloodshot going to be like a bigger deal than Batman? And we even like, I saw something the other day and I just completely forgot about it. But when Spawn came out, it was a huge deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There were a ton of big name superheroes that hadn't even got a movie, when the Spawn movie came out.
Right.
You can think what you want about it, but you have to consider that the money was there and the market was there.
Yeah. So it's interesting to think though that those works that have become popular, is it because of the creator? It has to be. It's creator driven, right? And when you look back at most of the really famous characters now, Superman and Batman and all of Stanley, all the Stanley's stuff, right? They were originally out of one person's head or a small group of people, the Schusters or Kane or Lee, and they fostered these characters for a while and then kind of let them loose into the world. So really, comics started as very creator driven, but somewhere along the way, it got lost, and I just feel like it's finally coming back, and I think it's good for the industry and it's good for us as readers.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that stuff developed out of necessity too, because Stanley just had like all those fucking characters, and he couldn't write that shit like. Right. Every month. So, yeah. So you had to bring in, like, more people, and then, that started the whole, wait, like, different people are writing this? Well, I don't like this as much as, like, the new one, or I really like this more than, when who's writing that.
Yeah, so. A lot of people contribute Marvel's success to Stan Lee, and he's a legend now, but really, if you read Stan Lee's work, not only is it not very good, but if you listen to him talk about his early work there, he didn't even want to write comics. He really thought it was below him, and he was writing them for children. It was really only when other people took over his work and caressed it and really loved what he had laid down that these characters became what they are. So although Stan Lee is looked at as like the godfather of Marvel, really that's all he is. He's the godfather of Marvel, or maybe he's the biological dad, the deadbeat dad.
The bio dad skipped out, and then like the stepdads raised all the kids independently, and some of them turned out really great, and now people are giving Stan Lee credit for being the biological father.
Right. Good job, Stan.
It's weird.
But he had great little archetypes, and that's really it. He wasn't a great writer, and he didn't really give a shit. A lot of like what he did was just for simplicity's sake.
Right. I do think the necessity thing is kind of interesting. I mean, imagine like if back in the day, people were like, "When's the next fucking Hemingway book coming out, dude? Come on! Like, we need one every month for all of these characters.
Yeah, release a chapter.
Yeah. What's the old man in the sea doing? You know, like where's he at? I need to know."
Yeah, it is an interesting world, and I think it's. We've talked in the past actually about how it would be wonderful if DC or Marvel would release things in seasons.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the ultimate creator solution in the end, where we would really transcribe over to completely creator-driven work. The one last thing is I hate trying to look at old comics because they don't have the creators on the cover.
Yeah. It sucks.
I don't even know how people handled it in like the 90s. I was a kid, I was a teen or whatever in my 90s, so I didn't really give a shit yet. But how could you be a serious comic reader? And I mean, you'd have to like look for the page on everything just to figure out who was like the creative team on it. It would have been awful. Yeah,
it is awful. And it sucks when like that someone awesome wrote like a huge run of, this character, and then you go like shuffling through the long boxes at the comic shop and you're like, I have no idea like where to start. Like I know it was after this guy, but I can't even like find any shit by this guy. So am I too far in the future or the past or?
Yeah, it's weird. Do you have any last words on this topic? I feel like this topic is so large that it's hard to really break down into it in just one of these 20-minute conversations. So I think we'll probably come back to some similar themes. Like I said, we're going to talk about
perception of
comic readers, and I think this is part of that as well. And there's some other angles that I think we'll get into as we move forward in time.
One last point, I guess, that I want to touch on is, where do you think the market is going?
Long term, I think in 5 to 10 years, there will be no floppies except as novelty. I don't think they will exist.
Well, I'm talking about like creators versus characters, though.
Right. Which I'm getting around to that.
Okay.
So, and I think the reason that is as we move more and more towards creator-driven works, and those seem to sell as trade paperback. Anything that's really creator-driven work, people
does well in trade,
flock to the trades, and we're going to see those works, the things like the B tier stuff, move more and more to pushing that trade versus the singles. And as that happens, I think we'll see a push in the industry to go more and more towards trades as companies like Marvel and DC realize how much easier it is to work that monthly and how much less they have to deal with like diamond distributors and things like that. I think we'll see a push towards that, and then that will naturally drag the rest of the industry in that direction.
It's interesting take. My point on it was that I think it's every year Image gets a little bit bigger. And that has to be because people are following creators. Like, because they have like all the good ones. I mean, like they took all the good ones from Marvel, they took all the good ones from DC. Like everyone that's interesting really like has a book at Image right now. At least one. I mean, Brubaker's fucking exclusive to him, and he's like one of the best writers on the scene now, like easily. You know, Jason Aaron has titles on there.
Yeah. Brian K. Vaughan.
fucking,
Kirkman, obviously The Walking Dead with Image, I think, is a huge reason why Image is where it's at. A lot of casual readers have no idea what Image is, but now they know Image makes Walking Dead, and they associate Walking Dead with quality, and now they associate Image with quality. So I think that's going to sow a lot of readers in the future.
Mm-hmm. But even before like the Walking Dead TV show came out, I mean, Image was still like climbing up in the ranks, pretty well. So yeah, I have to believe that that's where the market's going.
I think so too. Yeah. I think we'll see a lot from Image in the future. Mm-hmm. I can see Image in the next 5 years being over DC mm-hmm. for sure, and definitely up there, making it like a 3-man race.
Another question that I just thought of is how it's very easy, and they've become almost machine-like at it for these companies to promote characters. Like they're really good at it, you know, like the TV universes and the movie universes, and they're all just, you know, just here's just perfect for you. You can just have this. But how would you even, like, beyond the comic medium, promote like these creators that have all these great works to like the gen pop?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the start of that with the animated. Which one is it that they're doing? The Alan Moore? Is it Alan Moore's Killing Joke that they're doing animated? Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, it actually says Alan Moore's Batman: The Killing Joke, which I think is the beginning. You know, it's putting the original creators' names onto the work that gets done in the film industry, but also the same thing in the film industry needs to happen, and it is happening. Christopher Nolan's Batman, right, and it gets compared to Joel Schumacher's Batman, and that gets compared to Tim Burton's Batman. And as people begin to see more iterations of the characters presented and seeing different creators do different things with them, I think it'll naturally work its way over to their understanding of comics as these characters can change and be different. Right?
So more just like a general cultural shift.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Just people are going to start looking for creators because that's what you do.
I think people are going to, as people become more familiar with comics and understand more that comics are for adults mostly now, they'll realize that they hold to the same standards as other mediums more and more, I believe. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us. Check back with us every Thursday morning when we do a weekly pull list review. Every Monday we have something like this where we either talk about the industry, review a trade, talk about some bargain bin stuff that you can get super cheap that you should read, all that kind of stuff. So Facebook, Twitter, give us a like or subscribe or any of that kind of stuff. And lastly, do you guys have any guilty character pleasures?
Who's your question?
Yeah.
I think the question's probably one for me. Number one.
Yeah, who's that character that you'll read even if somebody you normally wouldn't read is writing it, or somebody whose art you don't like is, doing the art? Who is it for you? Do you have any of those at all? And also, what do you think of the future? What do you think is going to happen? Am I an idiot for thinking we're going to go to all trades and digital? Is Drew an idiot for the things he said? Yes. All right, thanks.